So I thought I would talk a little bit about cross-synthesis and morphing. We talked about extracting all these living features from the signal, and when you apply a feature extracted from one signal onto another one, you can create a kind of a recombinant hybrid thing that I looked up how to pronounce that. It's a Kyma. So I think it's like a goat cross between a lion and a goat. For example, instead of applying the amplitude envelope from the vocoder multiband analysis to a pulse train to resynthesize, you could apply it to a different sound source to kind of make a cross between the two. So here is a vocoder. And it has feeding into it guitar on the one side, on the one hand.
All is waiting, she said.
And the voice on the other side. And so you can apply something of the voice spectrum onto the frequencies coming from the guitar. And this is just another example of that with a bunch of dogs growling and a voice controlling. And here's another example with a voice and a drum. I should play the individual parts.
Never talk to him, walk in the street. Talk.
This is yet another example with the sounds of dolphins feeding into the vocal bird and the speech. Sorry. And you can also use it, you don't have to use it with speech. This is an example of a bottle rocket going into the vocoder and being crossed with the sound of a rainstorm. So here's the bottle rocket. And this is just the sound of rain, and you can make a kind of a Another form of cross-synthesis you can do with RE analysis. RE analysis creates a time-varying filter from the sample that you analyze, and then you can feed a different source through that filter. So this is this is a guitar loop feeding through an analysis of somebody saying tingling with excitement. So you can slow down how quickly or slowly you move through this changing filter. How do you get it? In the tools menu, there is something called RE analysis. And RE analysis, it is does something like a spectral analysis, but in a way you want to get a spectral envelope instead of the actual spectrum. And just like with the regular amplitude envelope, you don't want all of the details, you don't want all of these little details. You want just the kind of general overall shape. And the RE will do that for you, will get that for you. So when you specify the number of poles of the filter, the more poles you have, it's going to try to kind of fit the spectrum with these filter poles. So if the more poles you have, the more closer to the actual spectrum you're going to get. And you don't actually want that. You want more of a smooth shape. So it's better not to have like 100 poles or something. And then the filter updates are how quickly those filters can change. And the averaging time roughly corresponds to the frame length in your spectrum. Did that answer your question, Kurt? So spectral, the cross synthesis, this kind of cross synthesis, is similar to sculpture. So if you start with like a solid block of butter and you use your spectrum to carve away certain parts of that spectrum and mix it very close. So it's like you're taking this block of frequencies and you're going to carve away some of them to make a new spectrum. So it's like sculpture. You want to start with a very solid block to start with before you can start carving away. If you started with Swiss cheese instead of the solid block of butter, then there would already be holes in the spectrum. So all of this is I just wanted to put in a butter head for.
That's a quote.
Apparently, there's a tradition in the Minnesota State Fair. The beauty queen will have her sculpture immortalized in a block of butter. But it's the same idea with cross synthesis. You want to do something to your source to have it be completely kind of filled in, so that when your filters come and take something out of it, the subtractive synthesis, that there aren't already gaps in it. And so just to give like some rule of thumb or some advice about the cross synthesis, it can help to use a compressor to make the amplitude levels kind of more constant. You have less variation in the amplitudes. And it can also help if you fill in any gaps, like if there's silences in the thing that you're cross-synthesizing with. It can help to have either like background noise or mix several things together, just so there's always something there so that you can start taking away from it. Otherwise, you can't take away from it. It's just cheap. talked about RE, but I did want to also mention, if you've done a spectral analysis, you can do a kind of a cross-synthesis by taking the amplitude envelopes from one of the analyses you did and the frequency envelopes from a different one to cross them. This is an example of taking the amplitudes of a voice and the frequencies from a bell. This was for someone who was trying to do Joan of Arc, doing a play about Joan of Arc, and she heard the bells talking, so we tried to take So that was taking the amplitude envelopes from the voice and the frequency envelopes from the bell. This is taking the amplitude envelopes from a drum analysis and the frequency envelopes from a synthetic spectrum, which is a Shepherd tone, an infinitely refined resounding. This is an example of using the filter bank for resynthesizing. This is a sample of a North African drum. And this is using the spectrum from that drum to control the filter bank on noise. One advantage of that is you can slow it down and it's still just bright and crisp. It's all coming from the noise. And this is a different sample of a sample of a train. Just recorded in Shanghai. And this is taking the train sample and feeding it through the filter bank that's controlled by the drum. So with the tau editor, you can combine, you can match or cross or mix and match all the different envelopes, frequency, amplitude, and format envelopes. I'll just play the original of this. I won't actually go through all the steps of doing this because of the time. Okay, so here is that is a shakuhachi, and it's been dragged into a tau editor. And the tau will extract an amplitude envelope and a frequency envelope. And the kind of a form an envelope is kind of like the brightness of the spectrum. And I'm going to add a voice. And what you can do in this editor is move the envelopes around to match each other. So I'm going to change her voice to match the amplitude envelope of the. And now I'm going to try to match her frequency to the first, just get close. And then there's also an option here that says match parameter envelopes. So I want to match her pitch envelope to that shakuhachi one during the voice portions only, and I'll let it have 16 points to do the matching. If I solo that,
It's the voice now.
and I'll put them into center the pen position so they're more lined up instead of one. Set it to more. then you can press the galleries button, and it will give you a kind of a selection of different things that you can do with those analyzed samples. So we could use this harmonizer. And other kinds of morphing, monotone morphing. So I would like to make sure that to talk about what we're going to do in the lab. So I'm going to skip ahead, and then if there's time, we'll go back and do some more about marking. So the first, just to kind of tie things together, it might be worth asking the question, why bother to synthesize these things? I mean, there's so many sample libraries out there, and you can always go out with your field recorder and gather new ones whenever you need them. Okay, so first of all, we're not really talking about substituting for samples. We're not talking about getting rid of samples, but only just enhancing the samples, what you can do with recordings, and augmenting what you can do with recordings. To me, the biggest reason for synthesizing is that it gives you more parameters that you can control. When you have a sample, really the only parameters you have is amplitude. You can control the rate, but then you can't really control that separately from frequency, and vice versa. So, but when you parameterize a sound and resynthesize it as a model or as a spectral synthesis, you have suddenly all kinds of parameters that you can control, and you can take it from also from the real world into some new world by changing those parameters in ways that couldn't be changed. Also, once you have it as a model, you could use the same data to control graphics and sound. So you could have this model world that's just data, and it could be generating the video and the sound together at the same time from the same source. And when you build up an environment in Kyma, then you can control it from a physical controllers. You have all these different controls that you can map to all these beautiful new instruments that people are building these days that are very refined and nuanced kinds of controls that you have. And you need something to control, and that if you've synthesized it, then you've got a lot more things you can control. So it's kind of tapping into the old school sound designers, like some of the knowledge they had. This is someone from Disney, that they used to actually build contraptions every time they needed a special sound. And in a way, we can do the same thing. We can build contraptions in software, and you get that same kind of pleasure and kind of control of putting your hands on something and controlling it with your hands while you're watching the picture. And in a way, it's getting back to the very first slide, the pleasure that we all got from hitting the drum and hitting things as we were kids. It can come back now with the physical controllers. So I think it was a super exciting time to be doing sound design. So now the idea is to kind of switch from looking at the tools that are in Kyma to thinking of a specific task or a specific challenge, and then trying to see what are the different ways of solving that. And that kind of activity is totally open-ended, so I thought it would be fun to just try to take a systematic way of doing it. And I found a graphic illustrator site from Peter Blegback, and this site is called amateur.org.uk. And he described that he did an experiment where he would imagine something that he had never seen before, and he would draw what he thought it would look like. And then he would go and find the thing in real life, or find a picture of it, and just draw from the picture. And the last step of this was to wait a couple of months and then draw from memory what this thing was. And he had some kind of interesting drawings. Like he tried to imagine lace. I guess he's probably seen it, so it's really more remembering it. And then this is when he observed it, he just drew it from life, and then when he remembered it. And one thing he noticed is the drawings he made from memory were in a way better than the ones that he made while he was looking at the object, because he was kind of drawing his impression of what that was rather than literally what he was seeing. So he retained these interesting, important elements out of it. So, so I thought we could try applying that same technique to start. We'll just have something a sound to think about. Start just without listening to a sample, just make it from memory or from your imagination. And then listen to a sample and analyze it, and then remake that sound with that extra information. And since we don't have a month to wait to do from memory, the next step would be to kind of take that into an imaginary world, expand and extend it. Okay, so I tried to do this with a steam engine, like a steam engine on a train. Okay, so this was my imagining of it. Was just imagining that there's water turning into steam, and then there's some pressure that builds up, and I guess it's called piston or something that there's it heats up and explodes and then pushes something. And I thought, okay, it's periodic, so I'll use an oscillator, and it's steam, and I just thought maybe noise kind of sounds like steam. And I thought, I remember something about, I think I can. There's really a vague memory. So this is just an example of that. I started with an oscillator. I thought it should be like an explosion, so I took that exponential shape. And the exponential goes, the waveform is going up, and I wanted to go down from to an explosion, so I wanted to go through that in reverse. And to do that, you set the frequency to be negative. Whenever the frequency is negative, you go backwards through that wave. And then I thought that there should be some kind of a control of how long the cycle was, the duty cycle, I guess. So I just said duty cycle inverse for inverse format. That will, in the Kyma oscillator, the bigger the numbers in this field, the faster it will go through the wave table. It will keep the repetition rate exactly what you have here in frequency, but it will go through the wave table and then stop. So there'll be the waveform and then a flat part, and then the waveform and a flat part when you don't have the forms of one. Then I pasted that into the scale field of noise, and then put it through a graphic EQ just to find the right noise. So kind of getting there. Well, so then I thought that you always hear a horn, hear the train making a horn, blowing the whistle of the horn. And imagined again that it probably is a steam-powered horn or something. So I put some noise through the two formant element to give it some pitch. And this was completely arbitrary, but I decided there's a mournful sound of the train whistle in the distance, so I set one of the formants to a pitch and another one to a minor third above it. And then I thought it I remember the train kind of going, the train whistle sound kind of like a moan, so I put in a key down, absolute value key down, but put it through a peak detector so that there would be some time for it to go up and some time for that to go down. And then I added that to the frequency so that the frequency would move a little bit. And then I thought, usually on the train you hear the crossing, you hear a crossing bell, or some of the trains have bells on the front. And I knew that the modal filter had a metallic setting in the prototypes. So I picked just the sound of a piece of metal that had pretty high frequency for the bell. And then put it trigger. I thought it might be lacking something, I don't know, I knew it was lacking something. So I decided to put it into the cross filter with the impulse of an outdoor scene to try to make it seem like it wasn't just a burst of noise. And then the next step is to observe an actual train. So this was a recording of a steam train in England. So the first step in observing it is maybe just zoom in and look at the waveform. And what I noticed was it seemed that it wasn't really an exponential. It looks more like probably a linear envelope up and down. Like and also that the groupings of them seem to be in groups of 6. Like there's a loud one and then another loud one. I don't know why that is. Maybe something about the way the number is made. See, every 6 there's like a loud one. So as an example of how that observation changed what I did, I took noise and multiplied it by this linear envelope instead. And I decided, since I wanted to sort of trigger a sequence of things, that I would use the analog sequencer in order to get the pattern of 6 cycles, so that the loud. So I put, in the analog sequencer, I put the first velocity at 1, and then the next 2 at a third. I looked at the waveform and saw it was about a third. And then I said from 0 to 5 to get the pattern of 6 again, and then put it on loop. So that's just an example of observing it and then changing the way you're synthesizing it. So the idea is, for the afternoon, is that after lunch we'll reconvene in the music technology lab and form teams to work on different challenges, or decide that you're going to be consultant and walk around and help all the different teams. And pick 2 or 3 challenges and just make those sounds. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were doing this. There we go. But the idea is to first start from scratch without any reference, and then look at the sample. There'll be a sample on the discs of all the workstations, so you can actually listen to a sample, and then recreate it based on what you learned from the sample, and then take it to another imaginary level, take it to the next step. So to observe it, you can maybe do an amplitude follower on it. You can just look at the waveform in the wave editor, or do a spectral analysis and look at the spectrum. You can drag it into the tau editor and see what the frequency envelope is in there, or just whatever. And so, yeah, then at the end, we'll just, if you're happy with what you got, we'll go around and sort of show it off. Each team can show off what they think. So the guidelines, I guess, are to try to avoid having any raw samples in the result. But, use a sample and analyze samples, but not to use some kind of resynthesis or completely synthesized thing. Spying on other teams is encouraged. So maybe you want to designate one member of the team just to be the spy. So in honor of, I saw at Google that one day they had the letters were Star Trek characters, the 46th anniversary of Star Trek. So I thought that, so some of these challenges have like a Star Trek theme. So the first one, I thought like maybe everyone can do the same first challenge, which is the bosun's whistle from Star Trek. So either remember it or imagine it. And synthesize it. Probably someone on your team knows what a bosun is. Oh, there you go. Okay, and then there is a sample from the TV series of the bosun's whistle. So after you try it first from memory, then you can look at the sample and analyze it, or drag it into town and look at it, and try again, and then maybe come up with an enhanced bosun's whistle for future Star Trek. Because I think they're working on the new Star Trek right now. The J.J. Abrams has a Star Trek that's in post-production pretty soon. So maybe we can make the bosun's whistle for that one. So, but first is lunch. So we can start strategizing together and forming teams and lunch, coffee, or